It was 1869. The British Empire was at its peak. Its military might held dominion over much of the world. In Porbandar, Gujarat, West India, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born. The world would come to know him as Gandhi, the man who broke the empire. Through his unique actions and teachings, he left a legacy that changed the way the world thought. As a young boy, Gandhi was part of a wealthy and well-connected family. His father was a local politician who was serving as prime minister for local princes. At the age of 13, Gandhi was married to Kasturba, even though he considered such a young marriage inhumane and cruel. Gandhi went to London to achieve a law degree. Coming from a less sophisticated environment, he felt out of place. His English was poor, and he wasn't familiar with modern society. He gave in to his feelings of inadequacy and tried to become an English gentleman, but he soon realized that his own character is what truly mattered. Gandhi first experienced discrimination when he was thrown out of a British official's office due to his color. In 1893, Gandhi went to South Africa for a short business trip. He had a first-class train ticket, but was asked to sit in the baggage car. When he refused, a police officer removed him to a waiting room where he shivered all night. He decided that night he would stay in South Africa and fight for the rights of his fellow Indians. In his autobiography he wrote, "The hardship to which I was subjected was superficial, only a symptom of the deep disease of color prejudice. I should try, if possible, to root out the disease and suffer hardships in the process." Gandhi educated Indians who had been imported to South Africa to work on sugar plantations about their rights. When a bill was passed that deprived Indians in South Africa from voting or becoming politically active, Gandhi strongly opposed this. He taught his fellow Indians to use passive resistance against South African authority by refusing to pay taxes and work. After a long struggle, the Union of South Africa recognized some of Gandhi's demands and implemented changes to validate Indian marriages and abolish the poll tax for Indians. By the time Gandhi returned to India in 1915, he had a revered stature among India's nationalist leaders. Gandhi's first priority was to take a train tour to see what condition India was in. There was a lot of poverty in India because of its caste system. The untouchables had the poorest jobs, education, and living conditions.
Gandhi regarded untouchability as a fiendish sin. Anything that is prejudicial to the welfare of the nation is untouchable, but no human being can be so.
The untouchables were unprotected and had no rights. It was a horrible issue that needed to be changed. The spinning wheel became Gandhi's political emblem, to show that India could rely on itself and not the West. Many followed Gandhi's lead and adopted the use of the spinning wheel. This movement showed the British Gandhi's strength through his people, who started calling him Mahatma Gandhi, meaning great soul. Unrest was rising in India, and in 1919, the Rowlatt Bill of Acts declared that any Indian suspected of terrorism could be put into prison without a trial. Gandhi spoke out against this and preached peaceful activism. On April 13, 1919, people gathered in Amritsar to hear preachings about the wrongdoings of the British government. British troops opened fire, killing 1,526 innocent men, women, and children. It was now clear that British rule in India had horrific consequences for its people.
In the past, Gandhi had been loyal to the British government, but it was the government's mistakes of the Rowlatt Act, followed by the Amritsar massacre, that showed the true corruption of the British government. Gandhi realized that there was no chance of getting fair treatment and planned to withdraw the nation's cooperation and give the people the nation they wanted. He began peaceful activism with publicized fasts, boycotts, refusal to pay taxes, the returning of British medals, and nonviolent demonstrations. Gandhi's fasts were successful because the British government was afraid that if Gandhi died, there would be rioting. One of Gandhi's major protests was his salt march. Britain had made it illegal for Indians to gather sea salt from their own beaches and had put a tax on it when Britain sold it to them. Gandhi led his followers on a 240-mile journey to gather salt. When the people had finally gathered their salt and were walking back home with it, Indian law officers began hitting the citizens with sticks. Without violence or self-defense, the innocent citizens kept marching and fell, one by one, from the beatings. This brutal attack, without retaliation, opened the eyes of Indians and British alike. This led not only to the freedom of protesting Indians from prison, but Gandhi was invited to discuss what was right for the people of India at the Round Table Conference of 1931. In 1935, Britain passed the Government of India Act, which gave control of local affairs to elected provincial governments. World War II began in 1939. In exchange for complete cooperation against Japan, England offered the Indians the right to independence after the war ceased. Gandhi said that it is unacceptable, as India was broken into so many states that it could possibly shatter into many small countries, and Gandhi was opposed to the war under any circumstances.
"We do not seek our independence out of Britain's ruin," said Gandhi, "but we oppose this war."
The Indian National Congress refused to support Britain, and another Satyagraha protest began with "Quit India" as its rallying cry. Gandhi and other INC members were imprisoned. When people heard of his imprisonment, riots and violence erupted. Even though Gandhi was in his mid-70s, he began a fast lasting 3 weeks to end the fighting. While in jail, Gandhi contracted malaria and was released on May 6, 1944. Ali Jinnah, leader of the Muslim League, fought Gandhi to separate the Muslims and Hindus and to rule the Muslims in an independent state he called Pakistan. Jinnah declared Direct Action Day on August 19, 1946, resulting in 5,000 dead and 15,000 wounded in Calcutta alone. To stop the rioting in Bihar, Gandhi, now 77, threatened to fast until death.
Against Gandhi's wishes, Britain's new leaders and the Indian Congress agreed on a plan for India's independence that included a separate Pakistan. Britain sent Lord Mountbatten to India in spring of 1947 to unite the Muslims and Hindus under one government. On Independence Day, August 15, 1947, massive riots occurred in Punjab, the dividing line between India and Pakistan. Hindus fleeing Pakistan fought Muslims fleeing India.
Hindus and Muslims alike, poor victims, furious at the vivisection of the land, killed and were killed, scattering along the dusty streets the stinking residue of freedom, which is death.
Both religious groups were angry with Gandhi, feeling responsible for much of this violence. Gandhi began a fast on January 13, 1948. After 5 days, more than 130 Muslim and Hindu groups signed a resolution for peace. 3 weeks later, on January 30th, 1948, Gandhi was walking with his nieces to a prayer meeting when he was greeted by some people who seemed to respect his contributions. At approximately 5:11 p.m., Mahatma Karamchand Gandhi took 3 shots to the chest at point-blank range. Only 1 year after India's freedom and 6 assassination attempts, Mahatma Karamchand Gandhi was dead by the hand of a Hindu Mahasabha activist. Sometimes a good man must die for the sake of a good purpose. Gandhi's life and his death affected the lives of millions and influenced world leaders such as Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. Although Gandhi died that fateful day, his memory and influence lives on. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I became deeply fascinated by his campaigns of nonviolent resistance. My skepticism concerning the power of love gradually diminished, and I came to see for the first time its potency in the area of social reform." Nelson Mandela dared to practice Gandhi's nonviolence in his fight against apartheid in South Africa. He looked to morality when science, technology, and the government had made things more chaotic. Gandhi influenced the world with his teachings, which had been influenced by Jesus Christ and his first steps to nonviolence. His actions and legacy leave lessons of peace for future generations to see.